Quang Hải đã được hít thở không khí bóng đá tại Pháp. Đây thật sự là khởi đầu tuyệt vời với tiền vệ tài năng này. Tuy nhiên, để thích nghi và khẳng định vị trí của mình tại League 2, Quang Hải còn nhiều điều phải làm. Thế nhưng cụ thể làm như thế nào? Để hiểu rõ hơn về vấn đề này, chúng ta có cuộc trò chuyện với ông Sasikumar, nhà vô địch Tiger Cup năm 1998, tuyển Singapore.
Hello Zing News, this is Sasikumar from Singapore.
Xin chào, tôi là Khánh Linh và đây là podcast của Zing News. Hello, Mr. Sasikumar. Thanks for joining us today. I'm sure that you know our best Vietnamese player when Quang Hải comes to Pau FC this season. This is considered as a dream come true for him. However, the life in France is not a paradise with Vietnamese player. And it seems that the honeymoon of Quang Hải is over. His coach, Didier Tholo, has not used Quang Hải in recent matches. From your viewpoint, what should Quang Hải do next?
No, first of all, I think a lot of Vietnamese people and football fans in Vietnam should be proud of what Quang Hai has achieved in signing for a League 2 club in France. It's not easy, especially me sitting in Spain now, watching a lot of football, and even with my sons they're much younger, going through the daily grind of football and training here. The culture of European football is completely different, and I think it's important that as ASEAN football fans and people who work in football and in football media understand that what Quang Hai has done is not easy. Instead of us, I think, maybe putting our attention to he's not playing and he is maybe not going to be successful, I think the first thing I like to stress here is that I really applaud him for taking the risk, the chance of a new adventure in his life. And it's never easy for anybody, let alone a footballer, to travel so far away to another country where, first of all, they don't even speak his language. Let's not forget that Quang Hai's first language is not French. Let's not even forget that, and I'm assuming here that English is not his best subject as well. He is probably very fluent in Vietnamese. So for someone to be taken out of his comfort zone in Vietnam and to move to France and be in a very, very highly competitive environment, first of all, I would like to congratulate him for doing that. Secondly, I think it's also very important to understand that an ASEAN player or an Asian player coming into European football is not guaranteed of a starting slot. It doesn't matter how talented the player is, because his competition is with fellow French players. His competition is with African players. His competition is with South American players. And let's not forget other European players as well, just not French. So for Quang Hai and the expectations of Vietnamese fans or fans in general to say that, hey, he's not playing now, and as such, this is not a successful venture, I think it's not fair. I think we really need to give him a bit more time. If I'm not wrong, he signed a 2-year contract. It also means that, maybe he will take anywhere between 6 to 8 months, maybe even up to 1 season to get used to football in France. I want to take you back and give you an example of Didier Drogba. When Didier Drogba moved from Marseille to Chelsea in the first season, when Chelsea and Jose Mourinho paid a lot of money for him, everyone was saying what a flop he was. Like, he wasn't starting, he couldn't score goals. But let's not forget what happened in the second season with Didier Drogba, right? And he went on to becoming one of the top strikers in the English Premier League who have never seen, right? So it's important for us to be a little bit patient with a player like Quang Hai. He's a real talent. I think he's a generational talent. You don't see talent like that coming, into the scene every day or every year. He's a generational talent. So I think it's very, very important for us to discuss the good things about what Quang Hai has done, with the sacrifice and moving abroad and putting himself out there. But I think his success will come. I think this can only be good news, not just for Vietnam, but for ASEAN football totally. If he does well in France, then they start thinking, oh, there might be more Vietnamese players, or there might be more Singaporean players or Thai players. So I think he's an ambassador for ASEAN football, and I think as people in the media, we really need to get behind him. And while it's great to discuss what can he do now and what are the things that probably he can change, but it's very important that we approach this topic with positivity rather than trying to look at it from a negative aspect.
Is it easy to say that Quang Hai makes a mistake when choosing a Pau FC? He should go to Japan or Heerenveen of Thailand. We all know that dreaming, desiring, daring to do is good, but Vietnamese players should accept the reality that going to Euro is still a bridge too far.
No, first of all, I think when you ask me the question, it puts me in two directions, right? So the first thing that you asked me to say, maybe should he have gone to Japan, Korea, Thailand? But if you look at football, the pinnacle of football is in Europe. The top football in the world is played in Europe, right? So for him to go to Europe is a natural step because when you do something, you want to be the best at it. When you do something, you don't want to be second best at it, right? You don't want to say, oh, let me lower my standards and go to maybe Japan, Korea, or Thailand. Let me forget about Europe. I think that's not the point. If I was advising him and he was my son or a brother, first thing I would actually tell him is go to Europe because test yourself against some of the best in the world. And if you fail, you always have a chance to come back and play in wherever you want to play in Southeast Asia or Asia. Because now he's got this valuable experience of playing in France, now the J League clubs can look at him, the Korean clubs can look at him, even the Thailand clubs can look at him, right? So I don't think so that him aiming high, going to France to play in the second division is necessarily a bad thing. I think what he is probably doing now is adapting to the football. I mean, he's still young, right? I mean, he can always come back and play in Thailand or even in Vietnam or the region. So I don't think so that, again, let's not focus in on what he could have done. I think he's done it. I think we should really look at the upside of what he's really doing. And I think to me, it's very, very important that he is taking this step because he can always come down and play in the, always come back and play in the region if he wants to. But if he misses this window of going to Europe and trying, it will never happen for him again when he's much older.
So let's change our perspective. Quang Hải must have been a real talent when he received an offer from France. So, from the viewpoint of Pop PC, what will they expect from Quang Hải?
That's a really good question. So, Quang Hai, if you look at why they signed him, Quang Hai did not do a trial at Pau, right? Basically, they watched all his video, looked at his background, looked at what he did for the national team, for the club team, and the scouting team at Pau basically recognized that this is a real genuine talent, and he can come to France and probably give them an edge in terms of attacking. He's got a very good left foot. He's very tricky. He's got good skills, and teams around the world look for such things. They look for special players who can unlock defense and maybe even score a goal or two. So, from my perspective, why they signed Quang Hai is because he's a talent. He is an extremely skillful player who can make a difference in very tight areas. But now the difference is Quang Hai needs to do that in France. He's done it at international level with Vietnam. He's done it in ASEAN level with Vietnam. He's done it with his club in Vietnamese football. But the French football is completely different. It's faster, it's stronger. So he needs to, I mean, the talent doesn't go away overnight. He doesn't become a bad player overnight. Let's not forget that as well. He's a talented player. He doesn't become a bad player overnight. What he really needs to do is to now get adapted to the system. I think, small things like where he's sleeping, what he's eating makes a big difference. I mean, is he eating Vietnamese food or is he having to eat French food? That all plays in his head. And when he goes onto the pitch, does he have enough strength to compete with the French players, his teammates? Does he have enough energy to last the training? That's why the coach is thinking that, okay, maybe he's not up to the level to play. Or maybe he can't start, or this is too physical. Let's prepare him when he's ready because they know that he's a talent. So I think what he really needs to do is to quickly adapt himself to the situation, understand and realize that he's here now. What his football he was playing in the past won't serve him in the future. So he really needs to understand that, okay, I'm here now. This is the style of football. I need to adapt my game quickly. Some players do it very fast. Some players have the ability to switch on and off and fairly quickly. Some take a bit longer, especially the flair players like Quang Hai, players who like to express themselves. It takes a while. It takes a while to get used to it. I'll give you a very good example. He might know this pass that he wants to pass, but because of a language barrier, when he passed, the player maybe said, play to his leg, not to the space. So all of a sudden he looks bad, but it's not that he looks bad. It's just that maybe he doesn't understand the player. So there's a breakdown in language. So I would really say that, and if he happens to be listening to this, interview is that for him to quickly adapt, learn the language as fast as possible, even the basics, I think is very, very important, and understand the culture, understand how football is played, because the French football, especially in second division, is extremely fast. It's extremely fast. So he needs to mature quickly. He needs to step up fairly quickly. So I think that's his challenge, and I'm sure people around him will be telling him, the coaches will be telling him. Hopefully, he can adapt quickly.
Quang Hai has been familiar with keeping the ball at his feet and does not do pressing often. Suddenly moves to high-paced competition. How he will adapt a different style like that? And furthermore, modern football requires a player to do many things. He needs to defend when necessary. Is it hard for South Asian player?
So I'll tell you, there's a big difference. There's a big difference if you put the player in a competitive, high-pressing environment where he's not used to it all his life. When Quang Hai grew up, he played in Vietnam and played with the national team. Even though they play good competition in the national team, that's not week in, week out. Every 4 or 5 months, they play a high-intensity game with the national team. But when he comes back to Vietnam, he's super relaxed. Nobody dares to press him because he's an extremely talented player. Everybody stands back. And then he gets this idea that he has time, right? So when that happens more and more, he becomes a really good player, right? He gets more time on the ball and he picks up the passes, he sprays the passes, he goes past player. But now he's in a new environment, nobody knows him, right? Nobody knows how good he is or how good he can be. They only know that if there's a ball with a player in front, they press, right? Now, it's not on the players to stop pressing Quang Hai. Now, Quang Hai needs to be faster than those players who are pressing him, right? So I think in terms of the mindset, it really boils down to the player, whether he is willing to adapt, change fairly quickly, because this is going to be, I think, the important factor, whether he succeeds or not. Because I keep saying this, he doesn't become a bad player overnight. It's just the environment maybe not suited for him, right? So this is where I think he's got to be very smart, and he does look like a smart player, that he needs to quickly change the way he's playing. It is very, very different for a player to come here at 8, 9, 10 and be ingrained with the system, the style of play, and growing up to be a 20-something-year-old and having that in your head, then trying to get a 25, 26-year-old Vietnamese player to go there and ask him to change in a matter of weeks. It's almost impossible sometimes, but I hope that the club is patient with him and they teach him, and hope he has the mindset to learn and grow.
So far, he hasn't shown his ability in France. The culture, as you said, the new environment, teammates, playing styles, and opponent seem to make him suffer a lot. From a former professional player, how can you adapt when you come to a new football club like Quang Hai?
Of course, it affects the confidence, right? I mean, just before this interview, you mentioned that you are nervous and excited to do this interview, and this is your first interview in English, right? It's natural for you to feel that way, but you're still doing it, and you're doing a great job at it. I think it's the same for Quang Hai. It's just that the subject is football now. He's a footballer, not a journalist like you interviewing me. So I think we need to have a level of patience with him, regardless of what goes around his group or the people around him. I think we need to look at him as an individual player. We need to give him the chance and give him all the support so that he succeeds, not just for himself, but it's for Vietnam, right? So if I were him, and again, I come back to the basic point of what is the easiest way to feel comfortable in an environment is the language. If you can speak the language, half the battle is won. If you can say good morning, how are you, have a small conversation in French, that goes a long way. Secondly, if you can understand the instructions from the coach and your teammates in French, in very, very basic French, I think that will help him a lot. So if I was Quang Hai, I would wake up in the morning from 8 till I go back to sleep at 12 o'clock. I would be watching every French movie, listening to every French lessons, French music, to ensure that at least in the next 4 to 5 months, you get to a level where you're conversational in French. Once you have that, I think the confidence becomes very natural. Things happen for him because he has all the skill sets to be a good player. Now he needs to fix his head a little bit in terms of his head, in terms of the way he learns, and his heart in terms of his confidence, right? So again, it's very important for who's around him and how they're advising him, and to focus in on the things that are most important and the things that are really going to help him become a better player in that environment right now, because he's got a perfect opportunity to make something out of this move to France. All he needs to do now is to understand what's going to help him. And it's important, again, I'll come back to what I said earlier. As people in the media like us, I think we need to really look at the positive side of things, and we really need to highlight how he's flying the flag for Vietnam and ASEAN football, instead of us sitting here and discussing why he's not playing. Because eventually he will play and he'll be a good player. Because again, like I said, he's a good player and he doesn't become a bad player overnight.
If you look at Thailand, there are multiple players moving abroad and succeeding. However, the country where the players succeed are Japan and Korea. Is that the evidence proving that Vietnamese players should go to the top Asian league first, then Europe later?
So I think the dynamics is completely different. If you look at the J League is committed to making sure that ASEAN players succeed in Japan, because there are many agenda behind that, right? The J League really wants to be the best league in Asia, and they are purposely doing that to make sure that more Thai players, more Indonesian players, all the players in big marketplaces come and succeed in Japan. So they invest a lot of resources into that too, right? And I'm pretty sure that when Chanakit first went to Japan, he was not left on his own. And knowing how the Japanese work, they might have a translator for him, Thailand to Japanese, right? So in many ways, he might have felt very comfortable because there was somebody to talk to. And I'm not sure what the arrangement is with Pau and Quang Hải, and knowing French teams do not necessarily have the resources to get a French to Vietnam translator who's there next to them every day, right? So that makes a huge difference. So when we are looking at Japan, and maybe even Korea and somewhere like France, it's not a real comparison. It is not a comparison. And I think his time will come where he will eventually come back and be very experienced playing in France, French League 2, which is a tough league. Again, I must say, it's a very, very tough league. And he's gone there. He's going to take all that experience. He's going to come back for the national team, or he's going to go to one of these big clubs in Southeast Asia or Asia, and he's going to be the player that is going to do it. I don't see any disadvantage of him being in France. He's just doing his time, and hopefully, I keep saying this again, hopefully he finds his feet fairly soon. Yes, that could be an option that he could have moved to a big Asian team, Southeast Asian team. But again, I applaud him for making the move to Europe. It's not easy, and he's done it.
If Quang Hai failed this season, his third one playing abroad, should he return to Vietnam or continue to fight even if he seemed to have no chance at the moment?
I think if he returns home now, he'll be labeled as someone who didn't succeed in France, right? And in life, if the first hurdle or you meet the first challenge or the obstacle and you give up, that's not a very good sign of your character, right? And as a journalist today, this interview might be good, might be bad, but is that going to stop you from doing the second interview? I don't think so, right? You're not going to give up. You're going to keep doing interview until you get better. No difference for Quang Hai. Anybody who tells him that he should come back and play in Vietnam are imposing their own insecurities. That means they have not achieved anything in life themselves by telling him to come back and play in Vietnam. That's their own worldview. That's their reality. In fact, I think everybody in Vietnam or ASEAN should be telling Quang Hai to stay in France and fight for his place. And that power and the energy of the people getting behind him is powerful. It's magical. So I think that we, as football fans of Southeast Asian football or Vietnamese fans, we should all be sending him messages on Instagram and Facebook and whichever social media platform he's on, saying that, hey, keep going. The good things are going to happen for you. You're flying the flag for the country. And we are sending you all the love from Vietnam. Instead of saying, hey, come back and play in Vietnam. What difference does it make when he comes back to play in Vietnam? Who does it really serve? It serves nobody, right? So I truly urge him and people around him and people listening to this podcast and the fans of Zing and of course Vietnamese football, pick up your phone and send a nice message to Quang Hải today. All right, and tell him that everybody is behind you. Maybe I might do that after this interview as well myself, as a start.
In 2018, you used to say that it's really difficult for a South Asian player to go to European leagues like England, Italy, Spain, and France. Now, you still believe that?
I still believe that. I still believe that it's going to be a mountain to climb for any player who's past the age of maybe 18, 19, 20 to come to Europe and play in one of the top leagues, because the competition, the intensity, the expectations is way too high. Unless you are growing up in this culture, unless you are eating, sleeping, training, talking like them, it's almost impossible to think that some players are going to make it. When I say make it the top level. But we look at the likes of Son Heung-min, Park Ji-sung, who came before, the Koreans and the Japanese who are doing really well. And then we need to ask ourselves, why are they doing so well? Let's not forget that they have a very intense environment themselves domestically. When you go to Japan, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of youth football clubs. They all play in competitions that are at very high level. The Japanese and the Koreans are known to travel around the world for competition at a very young age. They invest a lot of money being in tournaments against the Juventus of the world, the AC Milans of the world. So the boys grew up in a very competitive environment, knowing well that this is what football is all about. Outside of these two countries, outside of maybe another handful of countries, it is very, very, very hard to then say that we're going to take a Southeast Asian player or Asian player and feed him into a top tier league in Europe. It's not going to happen. First of all, a lot of clubs don't even look that way. They don't even look at players because they are, if you are in the English Premier League top 10, top 20 teams, AC Milan, in Italy, in Germany, even in France, where are they all looking? They're looking in South America, they're looking in Africa, they're looking in other parts of Europe. If they look at a player, they probably in Asia, they probably look at Japan, which has a very strong J League. They look at Korea, which has a very strong K League. They might look at some of the Middle Eastern countries. Outside of it, they don't look anywhere. Right? So for us to sit here and think that Southeast Asian football is going to produce the next Cristiano Ronaldo, we'd be lying to ourselves, honestly. But that's not to say that we cannot aim high. That's not to say that we cannot change football. So my understanding is, and I'm doing this with my two sons, is to take them here at a very young age and then let them grow up in this system. We go in this system. So when I want to talk about future, what is really the future? So is success playing for Manchester United or Chelsea or Liverpool or AC Milan or Borussia Dortmund? What is success, right? I think it's very relative. We need to understand what is the meaning of success for a Southeast Asian player. Is it going back to play for his national team, winning the AFF championship? Is it qualifying for the World Cup? So I think we need to collectively think about what is the definition of success for a Southeast Asian player. Of course, every player starts with dreaming of playing for one of the top teams in the world, Barcelona, Real Madrid. Everybody dreams of playing for them. The reality is very different. But that's not to say that if we took Quang Hải, for an example, and put him here when he was 11 years old or 10 years old, and he grew up here for 10 years. And I'm pretty sure with his talent and he developed in the right place here, he probably end up in playing in one of the top teams in La Liga, for sure. But the fact that he spent all his life in Vietnam with very little resources, maybe he didn't have the best training, best coaches, best diet and sports science, he is where he is today. So I still believe that Southeast Asian players can reach the top, but they have to come to Europe, where this is the center of football, early in their life. They really need to come early in their life. They get used to the style of football. They get used to their teammates, the language, the life, the food, the weather, everything that goes along with it. Every ingredient that you need to become a better player, you need to be here.
Wow, that's interesting sharing. Hope Quang Hải can overcome the problems in France. Thanks for your time so much. Hope we can discuss more from now on.
Thank you for having me on this interview. Thank you so much. Hope to see you soon and all the best to Zing.
Không có con đường nào dẫn đến thành công mà trải đầy hoa hồng, và hành trình chứng minh bản thân của mình tại Pau FC của Quang Hải vẫn còn dài. Hãy cùng chờ xem Quang Hải có thể cải thiện tình hình như thế nào.